So he goes back to the dust once again. Maybe he missed something a year later. What comes up to his magnet again? These small chips, red on one side, gray on the other. They're about 1/16 of an inch long, the largest ones. They're in every sampling, hundreds of them in each sampling. Why do they come up to the magnet? Because of the iron content. So he does an analysis on them. Sure enough, confirms that it's very similar to thermite. So he takes a chip, cuts it in slices it open, zooms in 50,000 times. What does he see? Extremely small particles of iron oxide powder and aluminum, 1,000 times smaller than the human hair. These are at the nano scale. They have no business being that small. They're highly engineered components, perfectly uniform. 40 nanometer crystalline rhomboidal shaped iron oxide particles and wafers of aluminum powder, 40 nanometers by 400 nanometers. These are in the perfect proportion to each other to make up thermite. And they're set in an organic bed of carbon. This provides the gas power, the pressuring, the gassing. This provides the gas that makes for the explosive work. You added extremely small particles have an incredible surface area, so the ignition or the chemical reaction occurs almost instantaneously. He puts it in a heater, basically, a differential scanning calorimeter, and they blow up, basically, at 420 degrees centigrade, just like the literature that's been produced on this substance. He compares the spheres that are produced from that ignition, and they match the chemicals of the spheres found in the World Trade Center dust. Fascinating. This stuff is not made in a cave in Afghanistan. It is made only in the most sophisticated Defense Department contracting laboratories. All of this work is documented very carefully in a 25-page peer-reviewed scientific paper from the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. It is moving through scientific circles with quite a bit of controversy. Dr. Jones then concludes that these experiments through EDS, XRF, etc., identifying these various components, finds that it's extremely compelling evidence that thermitic compounds were deliberately placed in both the World Trade Center, Twin Towers, and Building 7. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you a very special guest who can provide some more perspective for us. Tom worked as an explosives technician for Controlled Demolition, Inc., the top-rated explosive demolition firm in the world, owned by the Loiseau family during the years surrounding 9/11 as an explosives loader for about 3 years. 2.5 altogether, actually. He placed explosives in many buildings to prepare them for demolition. He was licensed by the New York Fire Department to handle explosives. He worked on major projects such as the Seattle Kingdome, Three Rivers Stadium, Philadelphia Naval Hospital, Keyspan gas holders in New York, among others. His work is published in the book Implosion by Black Dog Publishing. Let's ask Tom what he thinks about the destruction of World Trade Center 7. Mr. Tom Sullivan. Tom?
Thanks, Richard.
Well, first of all, Tom, we had somebody call CDI, Controlled Demolition, Inc., and they told him that they've never heard of you.
Well, that's not surprising since I haven't worked for those guys for about 10 years. And I really wouldn't have expected the front office to remember me. But I wanted to say tonight that I don't represent CDI here tonight. But I want to also add that I was very fortunate to be able to be trained by the very best in the business.
Well, is it true that anybody can go and implode a building by placing explosives throughout the building? Maybe the mafia or somebody did.
No hitmen here. No, it takes experts. Absolutely not. You need experts. But let me explain briefly. First, you have to weaken the building. And that's after studies are done by structural engineers to explain exactly how the building was built in the first place. At that point, staircases are cut, at intervals. Firewalls are removed. Elevator shafts are cut, including the rails, and the elevator car is removed. Then all the support columns on the load floors are cut with a torch. And that essentially removes about 20% of their strength. And even with all that compromising and weakening, the building is still safe to enter. We keep working in it. Film crews and camera crews come in and interview. So the story that just a few column failures can cause a synchronized global collapse, I got to tell you, well, that's just nonsense. The final step at this point would be that you load the building with RDX charges. And they have individual delays, and sometimes even 2 to 3 different delays on a given floor. So the work is very complex and precise, requiring years of experience.
Well, say in Building 7, how would you get in there to load those explosives?
Well, looking at the building, it wouldn't be a problem once you gained access to the elevator shafts. Then a team of expert loaders would have access to the core columns and the beams. At that point, the rest could be accomplished with just the right kinds of explosives for the job at hand. There are a lot of choices available to accomplish this.
Well, speaking about loading it, you'd need to load all the floors with explosives, wouldn't you?
Well, funny thing about steel frame buildings, unlike masonry buildings, you don't have to load the entire building. All you need to really do to bring this building down in a successful implosion is to load essentially the bottom 30% of the building. And for example, when I was working at CDI, we did a similar type of load plan at a building in Hartford, Connecticut. It was a CNG building. And we only loaded the bottom section of that building, and it was a perfect implosion.
Well, Brent Blanchard of Protec says that you'd have detonation cord, miles of it, all over the place, and these casings left behind in the debris pile. What about that?
I think maybe Brent needs to get out a little bit more here. First off, wireless detonators have been available for years. You look at any action movie, you see these things going off all the time. And, of course, the military has them. But contractors don't use them. Why? Because it's just too expensive. As far as the casings are concerned, that's kind of odd because, generally speaking in the industry, at this point in time when I was working for them, we used RDX explosive cutter charges, which essentially were copper-jacketed tubes filled with RDX. And so when they are initiated, that is, go off, there's nothing left of those charges at all. In the case of thermite cutter charges, that's also the same situation. And in 1984, thermite self-consuming charges was a patented item. So I don't understand where Brent's coming from here.
Well, as somebody who does this work for a living, do you think there's any chance that fire could cause such an implosion?
Never. Never. Not even possible.
All right. Well, how about Ron Craig, Hollywood explosives expert? He's quoted as saying there would have been many blocks of broken windows all around the building. And Sham Sunder himself says you would have heard like a bomb going off.
Well, let me take this one at a time. The key word here is controlled. Maybe Ron doesn't know that word. But that's what I mean by controlled is that we use careful placement of charges, and they are focused and precise. We're not talking about setting off a bomb here. We're talking about a precise event of putting explosives in key areas. Plus, the amount of type of explosives can pretty well take care of any collateral damage. So you don't, this isn't a bomb going off which is going to shatter buildings and structures and windows blocks around. And with any implosion, so speaking about the second item from Sunder, there's never really a big one overwhelming explosion that you hear. But it's rather like waves of smaller explosions, kind of like a symphony of destruction, if you will, where each part of the orchestra is added to the next. These smaller waves come together, and as each floor is imploded progressively, causing the eventual implosion of the building.
Well, we pretty much describe Building 7 as a symmetrical collapse, but we're criticized by those supporting the official story that, no, it leaned.
Well, sometimes they do, and let me explain why. It all depends on if your delay timing was maybe just a bit off, you might get a bit of a lean going, or if your blasting plan calls for that. It just all depends. After all, there's a bit of art involved with implosions. So, yes, a lean is very possible.
Well, Tom, did you ever believe the official story?
Not even for a second, Richard. Not even for a second. And it's been, 10 years?
It took me 4 years to catch up, and you saw it on the first day.
Well, you have to understand. I've spent a lot of time at that point watching implosion after implosion after implosion that I had personally participated in. So when I saw these things happen on the TV when I was home in the Eastern Shore, I knew something was up. This was just not as what they were telling me.